All righty, so welcome everybody, all of our dear Fresh Start family, to another Fresh Start alumni webinar. Tonight, and I don't know why we waited so long, Sergio, so I apologize. Maybe because we use you every week. We feel bad. But really, it's an honor to have you join us. And so many of our alumni you've met over the years, but you've gone on to work with many of them. So this is really wonderful, special, and I'm sure we're going to have a meaningful dialogue and discussion. Just so everybody knows, and I see some newer faces here, this always works best with open Q&As. It makes it more rich. So if anybody's brave enough and willing enough to step in and ask a question, and then maybe Sergio will even be able to lead in and do a piece or two of work. That would be amazing. So we encourage questions. If you want to ask questions, you don't feel comfortable, then you can WhatsApp myself, you can WhatsApp Tova, you can go on to the Zoom chat and private message us, and we're happy to ask the question on your behalf. Just as a quick reminder, this will be recorded and put on YouTube, but even questions that are asked, it's only voices, not faces. The only face we'll show is Sergio's. So whoever does come on and ask a live question, it'll only be a voice, not a face. That being said, welcome everybody. Wonderful schluss. I do just want to give a quick announcement, and you guys will get emails from it. Usually we don't do alumni webinars so close together, but considering it's Pesach, Passover, that deserves its own alumni webinar. So God willing, Monday evening, March 7th, I believe, at 9 p.m., we will be joined by Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, who will be doing a pre-Pesach alumni webinar for us to hopefully allow us to go into the Yom Tov with the right mental and emotional frame of mind. So we're looking forward to that. But again, you'll get emails to that. That being said, Sergio, why don't you sort of lead off a little bit? Obviously, I would imagine most of the people on the chat have, a basic understanding based on the experience they had with you, because I pretty much think everybody here has had the privilege of having you work with them a little bit. But maybe there's some area or some topic that we can double down on, some recent developments in the world of somatic and trauma, just sort of open the discussion. And then we have some questions that came in, and hopefully it'll inspire some other questions as well.
Thank you so much, Johanan. I'm always love working with the folks at Fresh Start. I find that, working here, it's a really powerful experience to see so many people go through the program and actually transform their lives and seek different things of healing parts of themselves that grow more. And as usual, you guys know that worked with me in the past, that I love to start all sessions, all experiences with grounding, with arriving in ourselves. As you well know, I specialize at work with somatics. And somatics is all about working with the human body and the human nervous system to achieve self-regulation, equilibrium, balance, a sense of wellness, a sense of wholeness. So in the same spirit, I would like to start today's evening webinar with a little bit of grounding. And my favorite is always the simplest way humans do this is by simply orienting. So if you don't have your camera on, your camera off, if you're driving, maybe follow my words and just very simply notice your surroundings. Just allow your head, as I'm doing now, just allow it to turn somewhere. If you're driving and if it's safe, look about. Look what's on one side of the road, on another side of the road, keeping your hands on the wheel and on the road. And notice the images that are coming through your eyes as you allow yourself through your neck to be curious of the experience that surrounds you. As you do that, try to notice how your spine descends from your head, how it moves into your neck, and later into the larger muscles through the ribs and into the sacrum. Feel the sacrum. Sacrum is the end of the spine, is this triangular shaped bone that's so integral to the experience of the nervous system because so much goes through it, going to the legs and other parts of the body. But also notice the weight coming through the shoulders, how it splays itself through the spine and moves into the sacrum and into your pelvis. Continue to orient, continue to look about. Allow your eyes to be curious. Notice the colors, the textures, the forms. It is evening, so most likely you have artificial light. Notice the pronounced shadows that lights produce. It's not like daytime. It's not so all shadowed by light, but mostly by shadow because of light coming onto the objects. Noticing that and just being curious of how that happens really, how when we really focus on things, you begin to notice things you haven't noticed before. So as you move into your pelvis, feel the extension of those large muscles coming away from the pelvis into your knees and moving down your calves and shins, and how they connect into the ankles. And notice your ankles. Now, these miraculous joints, they're miraculous because they help us move everywhere. Everything we've ever done in our lives, move towards and to, we've done with our ankles. Whether we were just crawling on the ground or pushing away from it or walking or running, every experience we ever had moved through our ankles. Much forgotten joint. But notice how flexible it is. Notice your feet. And as we talk about the feet, feel the feet. And notice all these little teeny bones are connected by sinew, by muscle, by veins, and compose a foot, and how it arrives through the echoes of your shoes, your socks, into the floor. Notice this floor. Maybe feel into the heels. And notice that this floor is your ground. Because whatever you are, whatever building you're in, whether it be an office, whether it be a home, or even your car, it is connected to a foundation or the pavement itself if you're out there somewhere. Feel that, because that's the force of gravity coming through the earth. Notice your weight. And lastly, just notice the sounds. Notice the different sounds that might be arriving, maybe starting with just a digitized version of my voice coming through your computer audio, or your phone, or your pad, or wherever you are. And notice the other sounds you might hear. Maybe your children, maybe other people in the home. Maybe something is on in the home that you're listening to. Electronic sounds somewhere, or something else. Or maybe in this moment, you only hear my voice, and maybe you only hear, the touch of your heart moving through your tympanus, your eardrum. Just take a moment. Notice the images, notice the sounds, notice the weight coming through you, and just begin to be curious just for a moment, the messages your body's sending you now. Parts of your body that may be warm, cold, tight, loose. Maybe you don't feel certain parts of you. Notice the seat. Is the seat really receiving your body? Or maybe are you bracing away from it? Maybe are you almost like lifting or levitating yourself because you want to get off the seat? Or maybe you're floating above it. Or you're really coming down on it and you'll be really beginning to collapse and feel your way under you. Just be curious. Notice how this chair cups you, how it holds you, how it protects you. Whether it be a sofa, a lazy boy, whatever you are, just noticing that. Take a few moments, please, and just continue to be curious to the messages your body is sending you now, because these are the messages of the body, of the soma. Yeah, there we are. So, let's take a few more moments and then I'll do a little bit of introduction and you guys can join and share maybe your experiences, your questions, things you've experienced are different for you, things you've been curious about, or things that happen since you've been to Fresh Start that might be something to connect to somatic work. So again, my name is Sergio Ocampo, and you've probably seen me in those somatics introductions and and late morning that I've done at Fresh Start, just talking a little bit about what somatic work is. An hour is not enough. There's so much to be talk about what this is. And how we carry emotions, how we carry suffering in the body. It's really important to understand and know that's a huge component of what feels emotional suffering. And somatics is extremely important in mobilizing this experience. Some of you who've experienced the work know that stuff happens, things do shift, and we begin to move more towards wholeness, towards being better to ourselves. My work is always focused, of course, on everyday life experiences. I feel that a lot of the dysregulation, that is the suffering that people currently experience, the stickiest of it all is what comes from childhood, even stuff we don't remember. So a lot of my work moves around that, and also generational trauma, generational issues that come through our ancestors. Having said that, I don't have a lecture of any sort prepared. I'm more here to actually notice what the group wants and what you guys are curious about. So I'm open now if you're willing to ask a question or want to ask a question or make a comment, so we can begin to part from that.
Okay, so let's jump into that. We have some questions here, but we always like to start with the live ones.
Okay.
Does anybody have a live question you'd like to ask? Anybody like to step up? It's okay if not. Okay. So we'll take a minute. So the question that often comes up, and it came up again now, is, and I'm going to paraphrase the question, but in a lot of work that this person's done, they've attempted to lean in and try and feel, and they just can't, or they really, really struggle with it. What is it? What's the body telling you when it doesn't want to feel? And I know I speak now like just what I've seen, but I know oftentimes people feel frustrated and angry at themselves and like something's wrong. But the body is a compassionate piece of work that sometimes thinks it's doing what it thinks is in your best interest. So what can you tell someone who's struggling with feeling?
Hmm. I think that question, I can answer in two ways, like what's happening and what do I say to a person like that, which are very different. Let me start with just really explaining what's happening. What can possibly be happening when I want to feel and know I could feel more, but I can't, or that other people feel and I never have been able to, or that I have emotions that other folks don't have, but I wonder why I have different emotions. So now feeling is numbness. Now feeling is disconnection. Now feeling is associating. It has very different aspects to it. But the primary mechanism that's functioning in the human experience in the human body is what is named the freeze response. Freeze response, most of you guys have heard probably the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, I mean, it can get really intricate and complicated how to understand how it works, but I'll do so in a very simple way. I think I'll take my, my magic Huberman sphere, and the Huberman sphere is this little implement that I use to explain, function of living biological units, what the body does. Remember the heart rate does this, it just pulsates like this. And when it comes to this, it's really at a high energy level. You're, pulsing with a lot of energy, or here you have no energy, nothing here. Right? Emotions are the same way. The nervous system that regulates our emotional well-being also does this and should be doing this all day, right? But what happens when trauma comes into the nervous system, whatever reason it might be, and we can talk about classes of trauma, the nervous system starts activating way up here. It actually sits in this high energy state where big emotions live. These big emotions can be intolerable at times. Well, guess what happens when the emotions are like this, when they're up here? Not here, but way at, see, I'm actually pulling it now. You can't expand anymore. I'll break it if I do, right? When we're here, guess what happens? There's a different response that the nervous system recruits. It's called the freeze response. The freeze response is physiological in nature. It's kind of, this nervous system response that creates, changes in the body. And these changes in the body feel like numbness. They feel like you don't feel anything. It happens in the brain. The brain releases all these neurotransmitters, feel-good neurotransmitters that actually numb you. It feels numbing. It's like taking a sleeping pill. That's what they feel like. So you don't feel. So that's what's happening in our physiology. And what I really want to emphasize with that is that we have no control over it. These are automatic responses. The heart rate is an automatic response. If you just sit here and concentrate, heart stop, try it. Your heart will not stop, no matter what you say to it. It doesn't live up here. It lives in this very deep nervous system that regulates living systems. Well, guess what? That same system that regulates your heart regulates fight and flight and freeze. So those big emotions of anger, of fear, live in the same system that regulates the heartbeat, the breathing rate, blood pressure, etc. So when our system is like this, that thing called the freeze response comes on. So we feel super numb and we feel nothing. And this happens a lot in trauma. It's numbing because after a while, we can't live like this anymore. But what happens to us is that you say intuitively, so what do you guys think that happens after a freeze response goes in? What does this happen? Does this go like that? And then it just goes like this again? No, it stays up here. It's always like this. It's just that there's this thing on top of it that numbs us. And that's why we have problems. This is where we have our issues. Humanly, and this is just, biology, great fun, but that doesn't really answer the question. What do we say when we feel nothing? What do we say when we are unable to feel? And what we really have to say is that I have a lot of trauma. I've experienced a lot in my life. And for some reason, I cannot feel anymore. And there's a very, very definite reason why. But it creates so many problems. Because if I'm not able to feel, well, how can I feel how I love people? How can I feel when people love me and connect with me? How can I feel connected to others if I really actually don't feel the connection? It creates a lot of problems. And freeze response is a very normal response to trauma. Because what the body is trying to do is save us from the overwhelm of the traumatic experience, whatever that might be, right? It happens a lot in kids because kids have big emotions. They get really upset really fast. But if children remain upset for long periods of time, what happens? They numb out. They tune out. They tune out of their emotions. And then they blame themselves for that eventually. So this is a very long-winded answer. And you might be wondering, so what's the solution? What do you do about it? It's nice to know always like, oh, that's the way how this sits together, this how this works, how this that doesn't work. What is the solution? How can we mobilize away from trauma? When we have freeze, is we do somatic work. Somatic work is extremely powerful at melting this stuff. Because let me ask a question. Anybody have a question on what I just said? I know I tend to run on a lot with my knowledge of the work, and I don't want to confuse you because it can be a lot. As I say these words, I wonder if you guys have any questions about that, or I don't know, like an observation or something you've seen yourselves, or does that make sense? And if it doesn't, I can say it differently.
I'm just wondering if your answer is also to somebody who can't cry.
Yes.
Same.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the same answer. It's really what the freeze response does. It numbs emotions, right? It's a numbing agent. So imagine, say for example, I have a cut here and it really hurts a lot, and I go to the doctor, and they're going to sew it back together. Well, the doctor usually will put some Novocaine in there, an injection of a painkiller, and then it'll feel the wound, right? So they can sew it up and they can go home happily and heal. Well, this is exactly what the body's doing with trauma. It's actually injecting some Novocaine not to feel the pain. Yeah. It's almost like an emotional painkiller. And all of us have that response, and it does come on. So as I was saying, anybody else have a comment or a question about that? So
Well,
there's a question. Yeah, go ahead.
someone just asked, so how do we change? Well, I guess we can move into the next phase then. So how do we change that numbness?
Well, we begin to break through the freeze, there's many ways of doing that, but it's really how do we begin to feel the emotions that are underneath so we can work on the emotions that are keeping the freeze there. If our nervous system is up here, see, for example, we're here calm, here's overwhelm. When our system is so high up here, we're in the freeze response. There's a kind of a layer of freeze that comes over. What we want to get is to this piece here, all this activation, all this charge, so we can begin to decrease this piece. Say, for example, it's anger or fear. Mostly, a lot of times it's fear. How do we get to the fear so we can work on the fear so that then the freeze response comes down? Think of freeze response like an air conditioning system in summer. Say you're in Florida and it's really hot outside, and you have your thermostat to 72 degrees. So when it starts getting hotter than 72 degrees, the air conditioning unit comes on and begins to cool it down. That's what the freeze response does. If my temperature gets this high, I'm going to put in the freeze response, and then I don't feel anything. So in somatic work, we begin to mobilize that freeze by actually activating the body. And we activate the body through the gut. When the gut begins to create a certain vibration, that is movements there, it begins to break down the freeze and let it come down. So after that, the tools we use are somatic work. I mean, that will require me to answer that question, to really give a lecture, a training on somatic work, and that's beyond the scope of this. But that's
So
how
let's move, because she raised her hand and it's
sure.
either on this
Well,
topic
sorry.
or ZC, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank
There you
you.
are.
I'm on. Yeah, thanks for your information and everything you do. My question is, what if you are afraid to feel your feelings? What if some parts of you like the dissociation?
That's very normal, Cece. That's where you find, I'm not saying you, but in general, how, one finds comfort. And, what we do is we always defend ourselves in ways we can in order to feel okay, right? And these are ways that work for us, and they're very regulating to our nervous system, whatever strategies they are. And if we fear to feel, sometimes we're often are afraid to feel the fear, because we know if we feel the fear, we'll really feel the fear, and it's going to take us somewhere we don't want to go. So we keep away from feeling, if that makes sense to you, right? It's very natural.
So how do you break off from that? Like that comfort and not feeling? Like even pleasure, it doesn't differentiate between pain and pleasure. I don't want to feel like anything, and sometimes.
Well, if I ask you this, if I was to ask you, so if I say, where would your nervous system be? Would it be way up here, down here, down here, down here?
No, I'm a lot better. So I like the feeling of just not needing anything or anyone. Maybe it's an avoidant thing or something. But yeah, it's some kind of comfort, fear, a feeling. Yeah. Can't cry, of course. Same thing.
Yeah, and a lot of the wounding that comes with, if I get it right, from isolating, yes, which that is. Yeah.
I'm a very social person, but as long as it's from, like not too intimate.
Exactly. So it is, many times, because the wounding is an attachment. The wounding comes from our attachment to people early on in life. And there's a wound when our parents or wherever we grew up, this is going to show up, It can, assuming you've done some work and, you're a lot more regulated, but those attachment styles take time to unwind. How I attach to people is really how I learn to be with others and how I regulate my nervous system, right? If I have a safe other I grew up with, my nervous system will also feel safe. But there's a part of my interaction with the world that doesn't feel safe. So this feels comfortable to me. You stay over there and I'm over here, and we're okay. But the moment we begin to become more intimate in some way or closer, that feels to my nervous system dysregulating. So those are attachment wounds. They live within the realm of attachment. Attachment meaning how we are with our parents, how we are with our caretakers. We learn how to attach to humans in that way. So it's complex, right? So, I'm talking today about somatics, but somatics has everything to do with how I work with others and how I connect with other humans. It's all about that. Yeah. Does that make sense to you, Cincy?
Yes, sure. It makes a lot of sense. And I know a lot about attachment, but I'm saying specifically when I'm doing my therapy work, somatic work is the hardest kind of work for me.
Yeah, because it is, and it's really, for doing this work is really to finding a safe other that you can do this type of work where your nervous system will feel safe enough to move deeper into that wounding, right? Nervous system is not going to allow anything to happen where it doesn't feel comfortable, right? And if it doesn't feel comfortable, then there always will be this boundary. And so one doesn't step further, one doesn't step further. And really, as much as somatic work is good, but also finding a person to work with that can offer you that experience over time. Yeah, because somatic work shouldn't be super uncomfortable. Somatic work can be very gradual and very gentle and have big shifts over time. Because when it moves too fast, then it can become potentially dysregulating. You know, does that make sense? So
Yes. So what you're saying is that it's I can move. I can trust myself in feeling that I need these boundaries sometimes, and if I'm not willing, then I might not be ready, or I might not be by the right place.
it can be both. It can be one of those. You know, it's always honoring your own experience is extremely important, and finding someone who can honor your experience and then moving into healing from there.
Right. Thank you so much. Really
You,
appreciate
you,
it. Thanks.
you're welcking, Sissy. Andrea,
We're
have a
gonna
question?
ask Andrea just before we get to Andrea. Sergio, this reminds me of a lot of our folks are familiar with IFS and Dick Schwartz's book of No Bad Parts.
Yeah.
You know, I'm assuming it's the same idea that berating yourself and beating yourself up and, you know, being angry at even at the defense mechanism of flight is probably not very helpful in healing, right? You approach it, I mean, I think you said it, you approach it with compassion
Yeah.
and gentleness and respect. And
Typically, you know, most of the trauma wounding that I see have nothing to do with I fell off a roof or a dog attacked me or I had, you know, a disease or I had a cut when I was a kid. Most of it has to do with how I was seen or not seen by my parents, how I did not feel wanted or known or understood. And when that happens, you know, it creates these experiences of a lot of suffering for children. Children don't know what to do with this, and they embody it. It comes right in here, and it begins to live here in the body and up here in the mind. And when both coalesce, then we have this experience of difficulty moving forward. And that's immediately healable when we work with those two parts again. In some ways, you know, with a lot of empathy and moving just at the right pace, not too fast, not too slow. The process of therapy tells us how fast and how slow we're going to go. Yeah.
thank you. Andrea, welcome.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi, how are you, Andrea?
Happy to be here. Can you have a freeze and flight response at the same, I'm sorry, yeah, a freeze and fight response at the same time?
Freeze and fight, you said?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So, I just taught a 5-hour, 6-hour course last week on the polyvagal theory, which deals with all this stuff. And so it's kind of still fresh on my mind. You know, not that it's not always fresh on my mind, but to explain that. So imagine that your nervous system is here, right? And you're talking about the fight response, which is rage and anger. Right? This fist coming up here and then coming down through life. So when the fist comes too close here with too much energy, then the freeze response comes online. You see? It blocks it. So this is numbness. This is anger. These two parts here. So this system can be happening all the time. It's just suddenly your system settles, you know, the freeze response comes off, and then boom, here comes the rage, and then too much numbness. It's very common. It's very common that we enter from numbness or dissociation of being present or feeling nothing to feeling really enraged or angry or frustrated with our lives. And this is where depression lives. You know, when we have these two systems on, is where depression lives. That's what humans experience when they have these two nervous systems on at the same time.
So when the fight response overpowers the freeze, you're saying you can feel the anger? Like, is it intense?
No, it doesn't overpower it. It's just like, I mean, you can say it that way too, but, you know, say, for example, I get really angry and then, boom, I feel numbness. And I go about my day, I do my thing, and gradually your body, your nervous system will be okay. I've been on for a while. Let me let go because this is taking up a lot of energy. Goes away. And I continue to do my work. I start feeling weird and suddenly I feel angry again, right? And the freeze response comes online again, yeah? That's how it works. Or seems to work, yeah?
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So the freeze response can almost step in to protect you from the overwhelming feeling of the anger?
Absolutely. I'm glad you said it that way, Yohanan, because this is exactly what happened. It preserves us as humans from feeling the pain of something. It really does. I mean, I can go through how the system, why is there in us, but I think what's more important to understand is that it is in us, and that's what happens. It's what keeps us sane. Because can you imagine if the fear you might have felt or from an event, you felt it every day, every waking moment. You wouldn't be able to sleep, you wouldn't be able to eat, nothing. You wouldn't be able to do anything. It will drive you and drive us as humans out of our minds. So this is a protective response that we numb it out, and then we're able to function. But we're functioning with issues like, oh God, I feel depression, or I'm always anxious, or I can't ground myself, or I feel uncomfortable in public, what have you. I mean, it's very normal responses. And so it keeps us well, it keeps us alive, but it's really useful when we get to work with that, so we actually can come back to wholeness, to come back to flow, that is, being ourselves. So peace response is a kind of a tricky thing to understand because it's not often discussed in psychotherapeutic circles. Like in psychotherapy or psychology is mostly left for the somatic people, but it's very integral because in any therapy office, any therapist will see it. Oh, you're numbed out, or you're dissociated, or you have this weird depression that is going on in your life. The system is always on, though. You can see the functions there, but people don't realize it's there. It's just very important for us to become informed, because once we know, we become more human, right? We say like, oh, this is happening to me. It can be happening to anyone else. It's a very normal response to very abnormal experiences. Trauma is abnormal. It shouldn't be there. And the way humans react to the abnormal experiences usually is very normal. That's how what humans are meant to respond with, right? So that's a thing of struggling, is that we blame ourselves then, like, oh, I'm always been crazy. I've always been anxious. I'm always say the wrong thing, or I'm always a little bit too strident or too direct. Well, we're doing the best we can. We're reacting normally to something inside us that's way too much. And it will be way too much to any other human being who is feeling this at any time they've ever been alive. This is a very human experience. So I just want to really emphasize that we don't become pathological, that it's pathologized, like, oh, I have freeze, I'm diseased. No. It is a very normal response, And we're just trying to manage something that was unmanageable when it happened, right? I hope that makes sense. I hope that explanation makes sense to you guys. Yeah.
It does. Another question that came in here, and well, I'll just read it. What would your go-to exercise, the first one we should try while we are having a moment?
Well, it depends what kind of moment.
Okay, well, let's
I
break it
assume
down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of my go-tos, most folks, when they have a moment, usually having anxiety or anger. And my go-to always is the self-embrace, This, I've taught it many times, it's just bringing yourself and putting your hands around your chest and compressing. This is very containing. This is very containing. There's a safe other with you, a safe human that you can support you, if they can place either a hand on your shoulder, depending how you know them, on this, on your back, right between where the ribs end and the spine goes into the abdomen, on your back. That can be extremely powerfully regulating to people. These are the two probably best that I recommend. When we're really anxious and have a lot of thoughts, we're really worried, gosh, I don't know if I did the right thing, I can't sleep, is really to work with the brain directly. I mean, there's many, many ways that I know how to work with this. The most direct and safest way is, again, to put just a hand here on the forehead and right one behind your head. And just always remember to put this thumb underneath the bump in the back of your head. And when you do that, you'll notice that your thoughts will slow down. So this exercise actually begins to regulate the brain, the cortex. And when you're having problems or you have just too much to do, notice if you do this now that the thoughts you're having, they don't go away, but they slow down. the rate slows down, they begin to become slower and slower and slower. And when that happens, when your brain calms down, then the body has an opportunity to come down just a little bit. Yeah. And what I often do with folks, sometimes we're going back and forth between this and that, and then, oh my God, the thoughts come back again, and I go back here. It looks a little bit ridiculous, but if you do the sequence for a bit, you'll notice you will settle. You will come down. This is working with the brain, the prefrontal cortex, to slow it down. Regulates. Touch is very important. Touch is extremely important because wherever you put your hands on your body, the tissues underneath your hands will regulate. What does that mean that you regulate? They will soften. They'll become softer. More blood will move through them, right? It will feel more ease there. And when you feel more ease, there will be more a sense of safety for the body. So wherever something is not good, try it. Whenever you have maybe a bellyache, just put your hand there and bring your awareness to it. You will notice it will begin to ease. The pain will start coming down. It's super powerful. So having said that, depending on how you're moving through, if you're sad, place your hand on your heart. That's another one. Yeah, and just support the heart. Heart's right here in the middle, with this is my, the end of the sternum, and here comes the belt, and the stomach is right there. The heart's right here. It's just right there. People put their hands here. It's not there. It's right here. That's the heart. So when you feel sadness, placing a hand there and just supporting the heart, you'll feel a difference. That's, I think, I can go through so many others, but I think that will be something that's my go-to that for folks that are having difficulties.
Okay. On this topic, a question just came in here. It says, see, since I don't have issues fighting, and in fight or flight, I tend to fight, should I understand what you've been saying as continued desire or numbness to manage it? If not, how do I settle the immediate response to be ready to fight? So if he says, sorry, I tend to fight, not flee.
Well, trauma puts us in two responses, either fight or flight. Those are from there derive many emotions, right? So if we're moving towards fight, that is aggression or rage and anger, that's where nervous system is a go-to. How do I prepare myself for that? If I understand the question correctly, how do I manage that? In the same ways we manage all emotions. If you're feeling rage in your body, instead of lashing out physically, that's not going to help, or screaming, that's not going to help. It's just going to make it bigger. Is to really connect where do you feel the anger in your body? And you feel it in your heart. Most people feel it here in this axis or the stomach. Everybody's different, by the way. Some people feel it in their spine or their backs. But to place a hand here somewhere, often it's going to be here and here. And just hold that. Just connect with yourself for a moment. If that doesn't work, begin to mobilize your hands, right? And really to grab your thighs. You won't be able to see my thighs, so imagine I'm touching my thighs and just squeeze the thighs really a lot. You can't hurt yourself, by the way. Slowly, as hard as you can, then let go. And then notice what happens if the anger is getting more or less. Take a moment and just notice, just mobilize through it. If there's still more anger, again, move into it and really squeeze. Most of us have enough muscle that it doesn't hurt us, but you can really wring it. See how my hands are straining? Feel the anger. Notice the anger and then let go. And still holding. Then notice the chest. Notice if you take a deep breath. Notice if something of more emotion, maybe sadness come up. That means the body's mobilizing the anger. Right? Thighs are really good for that, or it can be your steering wheel. So always remember with anger, don't make sudden motions, not explosive motions. Those won't help. There's this gradual squeezing of something, pushing of something for a little bit, feeling it and letting go and resting. Maybe, do the little movement for maybe 10 seconds. rest for 20. And okay, see what happens next. Right? And those are ways to attenuate it, to bring it down just a little bit, right? Again, I always recommend no one do their own somatic work alone. That won't work. It can be helpful, but most times when we go into the deeper traumas by ourselves, we really take the risk of re-traumatizing ourselves. So what I teach here is just very simple ways to regulate in the moment. By all means, if there's traumatic experiences in us that really need help, please, by all means, work with somebody who's well-trained and certified to do somatic work. I mean, always want to lead with that. That's extremely important. Very, very important. I hope that answered the question about anger and moving with it, through it.
Tova, I think you had a question that came in.
First thing is a question that somebody wrote. I wanted to ask for a friend with so much trauma and so many levels. Thing is, she is mostly deaf. She wants to know if somatic therapy could be of any benefit to someone who's deaf.
And so I'm assuming that she's having symptoms of trauma, not only, it's not about the experience of not being able to hear, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, of course. I mean, in trauma, we work with the human body and the nervous system. Hearing is important, but of course, yeah, somatic work can be very powerful. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that a lot of the trauma that you see started when we were young. Trauma that was, so I'm wondering, for parents, how do we help when you recognize that a child is in trauma state, or they went through a big event, or somehow that they're going through depression or something like that? How do we help them if they're not old enough to go to somatic and they're not going to therapy? How do we as a parent help children when they're blocked, when they're numb?
Well, the first thing, the first rule, of working with children is understanding them. I think that's the more important thing, even before we do somatic work. When children feel understood for what's happened to them, or what they're going through, is extremely important. Because when kids feel seen, they open up a lot more. I used to work with little kids, from K through 5 in Venice, California, when I was first getting licensed. And, the one thing that they all had in common, I was trying to figure out, all these kids are so different. Some parents were extremely wealthy because they were members of, the entertainment industry in Los Angeles. And the other half were folks that were kind of barely scraping by. So public school, they had two of these populations. But the common denominator, all these children that were seeing me because they were having behavioral difficulties, acting up, everything that you might imagine, was that these kids were all lonely. They were lonely. They missed their parents. Their parents were always working or busy or doing something else, and they never had enough time for them. Not because the parents necessarily were bad people, because modern demands have us do that now. And these kids felt lonely, and they also felt not seen. And that's the experience that was very damaging to them, that when they came into my office, just being seen made a huge difference. So if my kid I know is having an issue, is to sit down and what's going on, like what's been happening, and just to understand them, even if their behavior, even if what they express, we don't agree with. That's their experience. And I think kids, when they feel seen and held by their adults and are there for them, that's huge. That's the big beginning piece towards healing for them, to feeling that trust. Second of all, I will also say touch. Again, I was working with hands. Is that when children are really upset, you're their parents, if they're willing and available, is to place hands on them, especially the hold, where you hold behind this. I can't really show you because I can't go backwards, but placing a hand behind their back and just supporting them there. And on the other side, here, and another hand back here. And they're small enough. That's extremely supportive. That's a really holding position with children. Older kids, here on the shoulder somewhere, where it feels safe here. It's very different. I mean, the approaches with kids are very different. But that's the biggest piece, is attunement. Attunement refers to how I connect with someone. How am I noticing what they're feeling? And by chance, are they noticing me? So when there's a rupture that's happening in the family, or they've been traumatized by something outside the home, is really just to be with them. And also you do a little bit of touch, because sometimes there's no words for it. And kids often won't have words for it, you know? If something's going on at school, often kids can't explain. How am I really feeling about this? I just don't feel good. So I think for me, what really worked is really this interaction of allowing myself to come into the world as they see the world, exactly how they see the world. Yeah. There was one little kid who, was always having issues because he couldn't pay attention. And they thought like, well, this kid doesn't care. He's not smart enough. Well, the typical assessments. Turns out that kid was extremely brilliant. He actually spoke 5 languages. I speak Spanish. He speaks Spanish. Nobody knew that. I mean, how smart this kid was. He was just plain bored. He's your archetypal, really bright kid. And, it took me to begin to see like, oh, wow, this kid needs a job. He can't just sit in the classroom and write notes or do whatever. Let's give him a job. Let's get him active in the class, erasing the blackboard, bringing stuff around. And that kid thrived afterwards because he needed something to do while he was learning. So let's look at our kids. Let's see them really for where they are.
I think that's you started the session tonight saying about most of the pain you see is the neglect that survivors have experienced. So I suppose that's the answer. A question came in here. You talked about fight and freeze.
Yeah.
What about the emotional flight, where I feel the emotions and I just run away from them? So I'm not covering them up. I'm not reacting angrily. I'm just getting away from it all. Is there and obviously it's not healthy. I'm paraphrasing here, but I can't go running to my room for 3 hours every time I'm thrown off. How could somatic be used for that? And then I have an add-on question to that, but let's just stick with that one for right now. The flight response as it relates to somatic therapy.
Well, the flight response is what? Flight means run away.
Right.
But really, what really happens in trauma, it's flight and fight look pretty simple, but how does flight look in trauma? Flight looks like typically like we want to run away where we couldn't. We typically can't. And that's why we get stuck in that, right? The fear gets stuck in our bodies because, trauma is not so much in the event, it's how it, begins to live in our body. If I get in a car and somehow get in a collision and I feel a lot of fear, if, I'm not able to mobilize, I can walk away from that accident alive, but then be always afraid of getting back in a car and driving because the fear got stuck in my body. So to answer that question, how do I work with the fear is really somatically to begin to work with it. We're really working with fear and anxiety to mobilize it. It's again, many times also the same self-embrace, and to really ground your feet. But when we withdraw because we feel afraid, we need to really work on that piece. We really need to find some sort of healing in that. Trauma is about these big emotions that get stuck. This nervous system that climbs up here and stays up here. This is what we say, that whatever happened then still is living in the body. Trauma is unfinished business. It's stuff that happened to us that's still cycling in the body. And the body's reacting as if that same traumatic event was going on continuously over and over again, every day, every minute of my life. That's trauma. And, we can find ways of easing it, but I highly recommend when it really begins to interfere with our daily function to begin to address it, to begin to work with it, professionally. You can look to many ways, exercising and somatic work to assuage it, to make it feel better in the moment, but that's not healing, right? And really our objective in somatic work is really to heal, to actually heal the stuff, not to manage it. Managing is fine, it's great, but really we want to stop suffering. And suffering lives and always living in this thing that never ends. And Johanna, you were going to ask an additional add-on question to that.
I will, but I'll hold off on that because another question just came in, going back on what you said before, but that's how it works. We move all over the place. To talk about kids, they write, really worries me. What about me trying my very best? I think this is a question that resonates with all of us. I think it resonates with everybody.
Right.
But those that do this work maybe are more open to share our vulnerabilities. So I appreciate for the person who asked this question. What about me trying my very best to connect to my kids? However, I'm still working out my own traumas to be present for my kids in the way they need, attunement. What can I do while I'm still in the healing process, dealing with my own stuff? And I'm not that, I'll put words in their mouth, but I'm not the perfect parent I want to be. And I'm working on it. What go ahead.
That's a very human experience, and that's quite the question, and I see it very often. Yeah. The balance of the family is always going to be what we as parents experience internally. In other words, the more regulated we are, the more regulated our children are, because we are the models for our kids. And it's not even because of our actions, what we say or do, but the energy we have around us. Children are extremely sensitive. They can feel emotions, anxiety, anger very easily, and they are affected by that. What I would say, as we are healing and we realize, okay, I need to heal this piece, is to find allies that can come to help the family, whether it be an aunt or an uncle or anyone else that can also support the children in this process. It's really important to work together. As I'm doing my work, I might have my experiences like, oh my God, I got too angry, I did it again. Or I went and did this again, and geez, I can't control myself. But whatever people say, people use choice words to describe themselves. And usually people are really hard on themselves. Is to go, if you're healing, go easy on yourself. We're all going to make mistakes, but I highly recommend somehow we bring someone else to ally ourselves with that can help us, in so many ways support our kids, right? Whether it be a teacher, somebody in the community, a close family member, the older kids, wherever it might be, that's super important. I feel that, when folks come to repair their own wounding in order to be better parents, it's a very powerful thing. Kids heal really fast, by the way. As we change, the whole family dynamic will change. Say, for example, everything is chaos in my home, but I, Sergio, go to heal because I'm having this issue or that issue. When my energy begins to come down, guess what happens to the whole family dynamic, right? The whole family system energy also comes down somehow to meet me. And suddenly everyone begins to feel more regulated, more present, more available, even though they haven't done any work. I often seen that when mothers heal, their children will heal spontaneously. That is their emotional wounds. They'll become different kids. And you can't really see this. My mom might still be the way she is. She hasn't changed, but her emotional energy shifts. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one to see our children's experience. But please remember this, that this piece often is generational in nature. That who we are as mothers and fathers usually comes down to what happened to us with our parents. And then we have to ask ourselves the following question, which is very important. What happened to my mom and dad when they were growing up? What happened with their parents? And then we can ask the next question. What happened to my great-grandparents? What did they do to my grandparents or not do? Or maybe they were not available or something really bad happened historically, you see? It's not in us. It's what's happened to our whole families, right? It's generational in nature often. I see it over and over again. And folks really, really blame themselves. They really hard on themselves, see themselves as bad, defective, not good enough. And that's very defeating. And we really have to pull it back and bring it in perspective, is that we're all doing the best we can. So for you who asked that question where you're healing, that's amazing. That's great. Be patient with yourself. Go easy on yourself. Try to find some allies.
I would add one more point. I think it was Rabbi Russell who shared this with me in the past, because questions are always coming up. And he pointed out that explaining, obviously age appropriate. Explain so many times kids react because they're not sure what's going on with the parents. They're uncertain. But children are actually quite compassionate and understanding. And if you even just told them, hey, mommy's working or Toppy's working on himself, daddy's working on himself, trying to, I'm doing this journey and I'm going to get better at it. And I might slip up sometimes, but this is what life's all about. First of all, it's an incredible gift to give children the idea that at any age, healing is possible, that they're not doomed, that when they're in their 30s and they're in their 40s, they can look back and be like, oh, yes, that's right. I'm stuck. I'm feeling overwhelmed. But I remember my mother, I remember my father taking the plunge and doing this work, but also just to calm them down a little bit. And they're empathic, they're understanding, and they're compassionate. And we think they need so much more of us sometimes than they actually do. They need to feel connected. And sometimes when they see a mother or father losing it and they're not sure what it is. So if we can bring them in an appropriate way into the journey that you're going through, he always encouraged that. Tova, did you have any questions on your end that came in?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Somebody who went through severe abuse growing up, many incidents of severe abuse, is asking, she wants to go for somatic therapy, but she's wondering if it's possible to do it without having to talk about her story. It's too painful. She wants to know if somatic could be helpful just through body work with no words.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes. I mean, I work with a lot of folks, and there's people, some stories I never actually will never know what they are because I don't ask. Sometimes people will say what happened. Some people, I work with a lot of sexual trauma where I have no clue what happened. Neither do I need to know. But we work with it somatically to heal those wounds without having to know the story. The story is in the body. The story is in the nervous system in the body. The story is in the emotions in the nervous system. As we work with that, those big emotions from these big events can actually become healed. Yeah. When the system comes down, see, when your nervous system is up here, there's a lot of emotions. It's a lot of charge in the body. There's a lot of constriction, disconnection. And there's a lot in our minds. There's also a narrative of I'm defective, I'm wrong, I'm this, I'm that. And coping mechanisms. And there's also defenses, right? As this comes down, all this other stuff I spoke about just dissolves, just goes away. And I just want to say this is very important to know and understand what somatic work for me and how I work is that, I'm a trained psychotherapist, and so I work with the mind. I work with the experience of how, we receive the world and the meaning of things. That's really important. It really is. But one thing I notice is that somatic work is masterful of calming the nervous system of the body. And often what I notice is when the body calms down, there's no more processing needed. Suddenly folks are not processing like, oh, I just don't like this, I don't like that, I feel uncomfortable at work. Suddenly that all fades away and people actually forget about it. They don't even think anymore. It's so interesting. But if we try to change the mind, the body's still burning hot. That is, all that fire is here. There's no hope. We can't, the mind is not powerful enough to move against this bigger system that's sitting here. So always remember that. That's important to understand.
She says specifically she's been to therapy for many years and she feels like she's not getting anywhere. So she's curious about somatic.
I think, yeah, for this kind of trauma, absolutely. Absolutely. Work with someone that can work with this piece in sexual trauma. Yeah.
Chaim, you have your hand raised. Your camera's off now. Are you still there? Did you want to ask a question? Well, there you are, Chaim.
I thought you went into freeze.
Go ahead. Yeah, there you go.
I
thought he went into flight.
How are you, Chaim? Good evening.
Okay. I've been in freeze for a long time, a lot of years. I thought I had some privacy. I just hear somebody in the next room, so that's why. Not sure how many details I want to get. But I started been in freeze for years, a lot of therapy, not much progress, like I think a lot of people here feel. Finally somatic TRE started working for me.
Mhm.
Tremoring. And then I started working with a trauma therapist who's trained in in SE as well and other things. And um, I started the last few weeks tremoring, like it went from just my legs, like full body. Um, and I'm starting to a little bit remember my childhood, which has been very blocked, which
Mhm.
is amazing. Um, my question is, I think what you just touched on, is it important to know? You were talking about people sharing with you. What about the person themselves? Is it important to know what my story is?
For me,
Um,
you mean? If I were
for
your therapist?
myself,
Oh, for yourself.
doing the work, because I don't have any memories that, a lot of just,
Well,
um,
I'll answer this question in two ways. The first way I'll answer it is, what if I remember everything? What if I know everything that happened to me? You know, and you do somatic work. What happens is that the memories are not going to go away, but the emotions, the charge behind them goes away. You can think back and go like, oh, that was terrible. But there's no emotions anymore. It's just like, oh, it just happened. Right? That's healing. By the same token, if you can remember and you heal, you're okay with not remembering. Oh, something must have happened, or whatever. Or suddenly all the
mhm,
memories might come to you in dreams or in other ways, in other vehicles, right? Trauma is pretty complex. Sometimes there are no memories deposited because the experience was overwhelming and the brain just fragments everything. That's what it naturally does. If you understand how physical memory works, it's a fragmentation that happens, right? Or sometimes, quote unquote, the freeze just blocks everything out. I would say don't be too nervous about what arrives. You might have memories, but if you have a good somatic therapist, you can work with the charge associated with the memory. As the charge dissolves away, the memory might come up and you go like, oh, that's pretty curious. I can remember that stuff. I
mm,
could remember that stuff. Traumatic memories live. I can't remember when it was. My mother was going through some images and from when I was a little kid, and there was this, little image of this little blonde girl in one of the pictures, when I was sitting there. I go, my mom, who's that? But, when I first saw that image, I had this really warm feeling in my body, like in this sadness out of nowhere. This is as an adult that I'm looking at this picture. I'm looking at this picture and looking, and I go to my mom, Mom, who is this person? Oh, she's this little girl that we took in for a few years, but her parents, we found them and they came to reclaim her, and you were so sad. I had forgotten all that, right? I forgot. So that's how memories are. Sometimes they'll come, sometimes they won't. And I've done my work on all these pieces. So to you is, those memories might arrive again. Yeah. But,
mhm.
trust the process that as those memories arrive for you, that you will begin to move through them as well with the emotions that are associated with those, if any. Might be nothing. Mhm.
Okay. And one more question I had about with the shaking, if I feel, because it's been happening just since it's been happening more and more,
Mhm.
even now at home now, not just in the session.
Yeah.
If I feel that coming on, should I lean into that, find a quiet place and shake it out? I
Well,
mean, it
can I
could
ask?
get like very,
Mhm.
um, very, I don't know, like a seizure almost. Um, or should I look to regulate and calm that down? Like, I feel like that's stuffing. I don't want to stuff. I didn't.
Well, let me ask you. When you go through that and you let it happen, how do you feel afterwards?
Um, Usually sad, more human. Not good necessarily, but
You
usually
feel
sad or
you feel a little bit
uh,
better than when you first started.
I feel more regulated. Yeah, yeah.
Well, what your nervous system might be doing is beginning to deactivate through tremoring, right? But I would say the following: try not to focus too much on only that pathway to deactivate. In other words, to bring yourself down, because that can become a habit. And what I've noticed in my practice is when folks become habituated to tremoring, they tremor more and more and more. And pretty soon the tremoring just overrides everything else and becomes a habit of the body. You know, if you
Mhm.
can in some ways say to yourself, okay, I'm going to tremor. Let me tremor maybe for 1 minute and then get out of it and go through my day. Try that and see what happens if it's better, you know?
Mhm.
Because it's very interesting that I worked with folks that become habituated, and every session was like that. We're moving forward anymore. Somehow the body
Mhm.
becomes, you know, habituated. This is what I'm going to do when I feel this way, but might not be going to the next step where maybe other emotions are showing up, other movements are showing up, or just completely different behavior, you know? So, you know, experiment with that and always consult with the person you're working with, because of course they know you. And that's
Mhm.
really, you know, really important too. And if this goes wrong, don't tell him Sergio Ocampo said that, please. All right. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Heinz.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Pinchas, you have your hand raised there. Thank you,
Hey,
Kai.
Paja, how are you?
Okay,
Hi.
you got to unmute. There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm just gonna share and maybe ask a little bit, because we were talking about memories. So for me, it's been a big piece in my healing is was like putting the pieces together of what actually happened. And at one point, doing some work, a memory did come back of some kind of abuse, and that have been like haunting me for a long time. More recently, I started EMDR and something called reconsolidation of memories. So it's been helpful, like to actually sit and bring up these very harsh memories. But what I'm dealing with now, actually, I was going to speak to someone about this, was it's very nice to have it in the head, but like, what about the body? Like the body has to heal. Like there's only, and I guess what you're speaking about just validates that. Like it's very nice to be able to go back and see the
Yeah.
stories. And again, it's not nice, but I'm saying it could be helpful in piecing the piece. Okay, wow, this actually happened to me, but now the body needs to heal,
Yes, you
and
know.
that's
Oh, yeah. You know, EMDR can be extremely helpful. It is a trauma model, but sometimes, you know, the body needs to heal. Yeah. It's more powerful or something. You know, the mind holds a lot of memories, and memories can be very disturbing for us because of those pathways, right? You know, the EMDR takes into consideration the emotions in the body. However, when we have, I think, you know, powerful traumas, I think is really important to work with the body a lot, you know, somatically, and then work with EMDR or concurrently, right? Yeah.
right.
And so I think, you know, as you're describing what you're feeling, what you're sensing now, it really, I have the sense that your body wants somatic work, some sort of work to begin to release
Right.
what's here. Yeah.
Right. Right.
You know, EMDR is really working with memories. And EMDR talks about a memory tree, you know, all these memories that lead, one memory leads to the next, to the next. Just thinking when you remember about your, I don't know, like what happened 5 years ago, you'll jump around and go like, oh, that trip to Florida. And then wasn't that the year, you know, my car, I got a new car. Well, that was when my little kid did this. It goes all over the place, but they're all connected. You know, and EMDR goes through that family tree or that memory tree and begins to work with it. But the emotions in the body are what fuel the brain. So the brain has all these pathways and they light up with the charge coming from the body. Imagine what's coming from your body is like gasoline and it fuels whatever's here. If you're feeling anxious, the anxiety will be more. If you have a hunger for something, the hunger is more. That's how I see it, right? Emotions get stuck in the body because of trauma. They're like fuel, like gasoline. They fuel whatever behavior happens to be there, whether it works or not. Does that make sense, Pinchas, to you?
Yeah.
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 Good,
Yeah.
good, good, good.
Okay, I want to we're gonna end with this question, which I'd totally be curious if there's a sorry, a somatic response to it. But Sergio, you are just naturally well informed on trauma, so I'm sure you'll have something insightful to say, even if there's no exercise for
Let's
us to
try.
do. How do we deal with our own emotionally neglectful parents and siblings withdrawing as they become dismissive and invalidating? And I know we hear this all the time, that when somebody starts a healing journey or somewhere in the way of their healing journey, those who realize that this individual is no longer playing in this toxic dance of dysfunction start fighting back with, you know, disowning and
Mm,
being
mm.
dismissive and being invalidating. I think you touched upon that a few minutes ago when you said we could think about what our parents did to them. But
Yeah.
any further thoughts on how
Well-
one can? And do you have an exercise to do? Maybe we could do it with
Well-
our parents.
Well, it's really coincidental because today I had a session with a person that I've been working with who returned to see her parents. And one of her parents reacted more violently and more of a rejection of them than before. And they did so because somehow, without even saying anything, they noticed how more regulated my client is. So this is an example of what happens in the family system. And we have children, whomever, I mean, parents, and they all come together. Everything is a system, it all sits together. Everybody bounces off each other, everyone's perfectly in their own spots and places, everybody has their role. But what happens when one individual, a kid, or one of the parents shifts or changes, the mom, the dad, whomever, the whole system becomes destabilized. You're not who you're supposed to be. Hey, come back here. You're supposed to support me, or you're supposed to actually be whom I have to take care of. I can't take care of you. What's my purpose in life? So everything becomes extremely unbalanced and dysregulated. And folks will respond with their primary response. If they tend to be anxious folks, they'll respond with more anxiety. If there's anger, it's going to be with more anger. If it's with disconnection, it's going to be more disconnection. So it's very common that as we start on our healing journey, that our families will be disconcerted and sometimes unsupportive, or just not understand us, or just maybe even step aside, or maybe be supportive. It can go in so many different directions. We have this talk this morning with this person. What to do in this experience is to just have small pieces of that, small little snippets of it. 1 minute here with dad, 1 minute here with mom. Hear them out and just step away and take time for yourself and move and orient towards your own pleasure, things you like to do, things you want to do. We cannot change them. We cannot convince them. We can't sit there and go say, hey, mom, I'm healing. If I feel better, you'll feel better. I'm doing it for, no. That's not going to work because they have their set way of seeing, because we're stepping away from the system. That can be extremely terrifying to a parent or parents or family. And this is why they react this way, because there's safety and predictability. What feels familiar is safe. And we always err on that. When we begin to change, things change a lot.
And it's needless to say, it's safe, even if it's hurtful and destructive.
Yes.
And we prefer safety and predictability.
Yes.
More than anything else in the world.
Absolutely. Yes, it's very illogical, but it's extremely present. Let's take a couple. Let's forget about big family system with all these dynamics. A man and a woman married together. And we're both, typically when we meet someone, we're all at the same energy level. If we've had a lot of anxiety, we'll find a complement that also has had adverse experience almost to the level that we've had, same difficulties. That's what I've noticed over and over again. Seldom does a very calm, grounded person find the person who is having struggles. Not to judge this person here. I'm not trying to say that or do that. Because we find ourselves somewhere in the spectrum. But what happens when a couple starts together here? One of them says, okay, I got some issues, I got to start working. And suddenly they start doing this. They have less charge, feel better, larger capacity to be with the world. Notice, they're not connecting anymore. And this person might become very panicked. It's like, oh, you're changing, you're going to leave me. You don't react the way you used to. I don't feel understood by you anymore. Am I wrong for healing? Are they wrong for reacting that way? Neither is wrong. It's a very natural experience. Our biggest wish is that person would join us and move back in this direction together. I see this very often in healing, and those of you who are here who are going through your own healing might begin to notice that. And really what's important is to communicate constantly, and to inspire each other to also do a little bit of work in some way. If it's not somatic work, something. Being a human being is tough, Yohanan, right? You would agree.
It's
know,
complicated.
it's
Yeah.
really complicated to be just a human being in this world, right? And that we do the best we can. We have so much stuff going on as humans. Let's go easy on ourselves. I mean, I think, we judge ourselves too much. We judge what we've done. And really, all of us who have survived experiences of trauma are really, really hard on ourselves, really judgmental. We tend to overachieve, overdo. Go easy on yourself. Really, really try to do that. And somatic work is extremely powerful by helping heal and have folks really come into their own wholeness into who they are. I hope I answered that question because it's a complicated one. It's a complicated one.
It is. And it's important. You did a wonderful job answering that. And I think it's a beautiful way to end. I always take this opportunity, Sergio, firstly, thank you for working with us and for doing all the great work you do. And of course, all of our alumni and the Fresh Start family for joining. It was wonderful seeing some freshmen. First time on the alumni webinar. You guys know who you are. It was wonderful seeing you. And again, we are looking forward to, you'll get an email, but God willing, Monday, April 7th with Rabbi YY, so we can hopefully have a different Passover, Pesach this year, and a more wholesome one and connected one. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sergio. And we'll see you guys in a little bit.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful
much.
evening. Take care of yourselves. And we'll see you, Yohanan. Maybe you'll invite me
Okay.
again. And we'll do another
We should
part,
do that.
another
After
piece
Passover.
with more stuff. Okay.
Deal.
Take care of yourself.
Okay.
Bye, guys. Have a
Take care,
wonderful
guys.
evening. Be well. Okay. Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.